This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so this way we are. We were talking about networking, we were talking about network security group rules, and we were talking about an important concept called virtual network to virtual network peering, and we understood how it works, what is the working mechanism behind it. Now let's do one more thing today. Now let's go here and let me open up my notepad. So if I go ahead and let's say type in a website called irctc.co.in, like many of you all would have visited this website, right? So if I go ahead and type it in my browser, so this is irctc.co.in. So I'm just typing it in my browser. I'm just doing an enter, and I'm able to get this particular reservation web page, right? So how am I able to get this? How is the system able to understand that when I do an irctc.co.in, it should take me to this particular page and not something else? Okay, how is this, happening in the backend, or how is this basically going around in the backend? Does anyone have any idea about how this is happening and etc.? So the question is this: if I just hit this website, I'm being drawn to basically this particular page, right? So does anyone have any idea on how this is happening? Because why am I getting only irctc.co.in, not google.co or google.com, or rather some other website?
It was hosted on globally, right?
So hosted on globally. So what does that really mean out here? Let's understand this. So I have my local laptop, and using my laptop, I'm able to just go ahead and type in, let's say, irctc.co.in, right? And as and when I do an irctc.co.in, the very first thing that I need is an internet connection, because I need to communicate with the internet. So I need an internet connection, and I should be able to communicate with the internet. So how am I able to communicate with the internet? It's because my laptop has something known as a NIC card, a network interface card, using which it is able to basically go ahead and communicate with the internet that is out there. Now, without this NIC card, I won't be able to connect to the internet, right? So let's talk about NIC cards out here. So my laptop has a NIC card. So when I do an IRCTC search, when I say an irctc.co.in, my laptop, using the NIC card that is assigned to the laptop, is able to do an internet search for that particular website called irctc.co.in out here. So I have an IP address, something like, let's say, what's my IP? So this is the IP address from where I am communicating with the entire world. Meaning this is the IP address that is assigned to the NIC card of my laptop. Because as you all know, NIC cards or NIC cards are actually assigned a public or a private IP. So this is, let's say, the public IP that is assigned to the NIC card of my laptop, and my laptop, using the internet and using the NIC card, is able to do an internet search, and it's able to divert me to the actual website, which is irctc.co.in, which might be hosted out of a virtual machine. So it's nothing but this irctc.co.in is hosted from somewhere. Now let's, for our ease of understanding, let's imagine that the Indian Railways has went ahead, created a virtual machine in Azure, and then took all their code, installed IIS, and just thrown all the code on top of that virtual machine. So let's imagine that irctc.co.in is a website which is hosted out of a virtual machine that is running in Azure. Okay, so this particular virtual machine is responsible to give the code of irctc.co.in. Okay, just like we go ahead and install IIS and then say IIS website, let's imagine the government of India has also done the same thing. They had a technical team which went ahead, created a virtual machine here, and they said, okay, fine, whenever someone searches for irctc.co.in, please take them to this particular virtual machine and specifically to one particular IP address, because this virtual machine will have an IP address, right? And that IP address is again associated with the NIC card of this particular virtual machine. So let's imagine that the IP address is something like, I'm just giving a very imaginary IP address here, something like 20.0.0.1 public IP address of the virtual machine that is holding, or the public IP address of the NIC card that is attached to the virtual machine which is hosting the irctc.co.in out here. But how did the internet know that I need to specifically go to this particular address? So from here, how did I specifically go to this particular address out here, or this particular IP address out here? Because there are literally millions of IP addresses out there on the internet. So what happens is that in the internet, there is something known as name record servers. Name record servers, just imagine that these are like telephone directories that are online. So if you just try to search for a number or just try to search for a name, that's what we do on a telephone directory, right? So earlier those days we used to get big yellow books and all, using which we just search for a name and we get the number and we call that particular person, right? In the same way, imagine that name record servers are nothing but the telephone directories that are there online, not one but thousands of them. So nothing but servers which will hold something known as a name record, meaning it just has, okay, if someone does irctc.co.in, this is the name and this is the record. It just has this mapping. So whenever I do an internet search, the internet first diverts me to the name record servers. The name record servers has all these names that are kind of registered with them. So it understands that, okay, fine, you know what, I'll just go into this particular irctc, I found it, and irctc.co.in is mapped to 20.0.0.0.1, and so I'll return this name, and so I'll get diverted into this particular irctc.co.in into that particular virtual machine and then give the website back. All this happens in a fraction of seconds in the backend, and this entire thing is called as DNS, domain name system. So let's understand that using an example that we have in Azure. So let's go back and let's go into the virtual machine that we do have, which is VM1. And this VM1 has an IP address of 21.24.110.60. I take this and if I say default.html, I'm getting some address out here, right? And I'm hitting the direct IP address of the machine. I'm telling, okay, fine, this is the IP address of the machine. But the issue with this is that the users will not be able to remember this IP address. Imagine this is your website. This is your, let's say, your advertising website, and you have to share it with the world. You just cannot say the users that, you know what, Every time you want to visit my website, please type in 20.124.110.60. This is very difficult, right? So that's the very reason even in our phones, we do not search with the number, we search with the name, right? Because it's easier for us to remember the name rather than a number. That's how the human brain works. This is the very reason why you have websites not with a number but with a name, so that you can easily remember it. So what I'll do is that even my website now needs a name, not a number. So I want to associate my website with actually a name. So now I'm telling, okay, fine, this is how my website really looks like. There is a number, which is nothing but an IP address. And I want to associate this IP address with a name. Just like you taking my name, saying Kiran, and saving my number in your phone. That's it. So I want to associate this. How do I do that? Is that let me come back to Azure, and there's a section called DNS name. Do you see this, guys? And it says not configured. So let me do that. Let me configure it. I'll say go ahead, and I'll say test VM to ABC, something like this. So the name should be unique, and this is called as a DNS name label. And as and when I said test VM ABC, do you see the test VM to ABC is getting added with something called .eastus.cloudapp.azure.com. This entire thing is called fully qualified domain name. This is called fully qualified domain name. Like you have google.com, this is test ABC my website .eastus.cloudapp.azure.com. So let me say save. It'll take like a minute to save this out. And let's see what happens after this. So it is saved. Let me come back to my virtual machine. Let me give it a refresh. And if you see now, the DNS name has changed, right? This actually has a name. Test ABC dot something like this. If I now take this name, go to my browser, and I say /default.html, I'm getting the same response, right? Either I do this or I do this, I'm getting the same response, meaning this name is associated now with an IP. So this name now actually translates to this particular IP address. This is completely managed by Azure. Now, in order to understand whether this name is actually translating to this IP address, let me do one thing. Let me open up my PowerShell, and I'll just type in a very simple command called resolve hyphen DNS name. So I'm trying to resolve the name. This is called name resolution. I'm saying hyphen name. I'll just take this name out here. Now, do you see what happened? When I said resolve hyphen DNS name and then I gave a name, it's saying, okay, fine, you know what? Test something, something, something. Type is something known as A. We'll talk about what type is. And then you have what? 20, 124, 110, which is the same IP address that you're seeing that on my, on top of my screen. Meaning, how did all these records get managed? Microsoft managed it out. Whenever you said, okay, fine, go to this website, or let's say whenever you configure the DNS name, Microsoft added a record for this particular name to this particular IP, on the internet. This is how when you type this address, you are able to get that particular name out here, or when you're able to get your actual website out here. Make sense? Any questions still here? Anyone? Any questions still here? Great. Then so this is good enough. Sorry, this is good enough. This name is good enough, but it's still not friendly. It's not a friendly name. It is really tough to remember. Every time when I want to type a website, it's very tough to remember something like testvm2abc.eastus.cloudapp.azure.com. So I want a friendly name. Instead of I going ahead and asking Microsoft to give a name, can I go ahead make my own name? Yes, but you'll have to buy your own name, and this is called buying a domain. You have like popular websites like GoDaddy, using which you can buy something known as a domain name. So what I did is that I bought a domain name like a year ago. So if I go into, let's say, my GoDaddy account, so this is how it look like. And let me go into my products. So this is how my domain name looks like. This is my website called myazuretraining.xyz, which is very easier than this whole thing, right? Instead of someone, kind of visiting my website using something known as testvmabc dot something something something, it's easier for me to go ahead and let's say myazuretraining.xyz. Now, I won't recommend you all to go ahead and buy a website because it's a costly affair. You might end up paying a good amount of money if you don't know how to buy a website. But this class intention is only to understand how do you do a domain name mapping. Not, I mean, a theory is good enough for this. So even if you don't do a practical, it's okay. The theory is good enough because you might not have a domain name with you, right? Like the way I do, you might not have a domain name. So what do I do is like I just go into the domain name and let me come down and I'll say manage domain. So I'm going into something known as a domain manager. Let me come down and let me go into the actual manage something known as manage DNS out here. Now this is how it look like. This is the table that I was talking about. When I said the internet has a table which will have this record mapping like this is the table that I was actually talking about. And in this table, what I did is that I just said add and I just said choose A, which is called actual record, meaning an A record should always point to an IP address. So I'll say it's saying name, I'll say www, meaning if some if someone does a www dot myazuretraining.xyz, please take them to the IP address of my virtual machine that is there in Azure. This is how we add domain names in the backend. So you will have a domain manager who will do all this for you. So usually in, let's say, in different organizations, even DevOps engineers play this role, like adding a domain and having that domain mapped to an IP address. So I already done that. So here, if you see, I have an A record pointing to www, and this is pointing to 21.24.110.60. The same IP here, 21.24.110.60. And after adding it, usually the domain manager takes about 24 to 48 hours in order for your domain to be hosted on the internet. So I need to understand whether my domain is hosted on the internet on the internet or not. So what I'll do is I'll say, okay, fine, instead of test Azure ABC, something like this, I'll say www.myazuretraining.xyz. So I did it yesterday night, and I'm able to see a record pointing out to 20, 124, 110, 160, right? So let me take this website. So I'm able to get an IIS server. And if I go further, and if I say /default.html, my virtual machine running in Azure, and I was able to successfully map my own domain name to this particular virtual machine that is running in Azure. This is called domain name mapping. And in my case, if you are able to see these records that are there, it's telling my Azure training.xyz, type is A, IP address. This record mapping was not done by Microsoft. This is my own domain, and this record mapping is done by someone known as a GoDaddy. This is my domain manager because I went ahead and purchased the domains with, let's say, GoDaddy. This is my domain manager who's managing all my records. Okay. In the first case, when you look at this, which is test ABC, something like this, in this case, Microsoft did the domain mapping. I did not do anything. I did not went ahead and did not go add something. I did not do that. Microsoft did this for me. In the second case, I am doing it for my own self. Now, what is the advantage here? Is this easy to remember or is this easy to remember? Is it easy to remember?
Domain,
Right?
domain will be easy to
It's
understand. Yeah.
so you can just remember www.myazure.xyz. You don't have to actually kind of mug up like the way I'm doing test vm.est2.cloudapp. No, I'm not doing that. This is my domain. I want to manage these records right now. And I'm saying, okay, fine, you know what? Please help me in order to manage these domains. And I went to, let's say, a website called GoDaddy. And GoDaddy is now my domain manager who's helping me host my records using something known as NS, name servers. This is what I'm talking about. So when I started, I said there are something known as name record servers on the internet that will host all these records for you. And in my case, you have GoDaddy, which is acting as a name record server, which is helping me host all my records and it's telling me, okay, fine, this is the name record server that you're using, which is ns05.domaincontrol.com, ns06.domaincontrol.com. This is how GoDaddy is using its own servers to go ahead and host your records on the internet so that whenever someone types your website, it will take them to this particular address, which is called 20.124.110.60. Any questions still here, guys? Is this okay? Any questions that I can take?
హలో సార్,
Yeah, please go ahead.
ఇప్పుడు మనకి ఇక్కడ మనం డొమైన్స్ పర్చేస్ చేసేటప్పుడు ఐపీ అడ్రస్ అని మనకు నచ్చింది కావాలా సార్? సేమ్ ఇదేనా?
See, if you're purchasing a domain,
అవును సార్.
I am not concerned about the IP address now.
ఓకే
IP address can be associated at a later point in time, and the
ఓకే
IP address should be the IP address of the virtual machine that is hosting your website. So in
ఓకే
my
ఓకే
case, I had an
థ్యాంక్ యూ.
IP address, so I went ahead and added the IP address so that whenever someone types this website, they'll get diverted to this particular virtual machine and that virtual machine
Okay.
can actually display the code back.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions, guys?
Why don't we simplify the domain name in virtual in
I'm
Azure?
sorry, I
So
didn't
why
get you.
don't we, no, why don't we simplify the name in here itself, right?
I'm sorry,
Instead
I
of
still didn't get you.
instead of GoDaddy, okay, virtual machine we have renamed it, right?
Hmm.
Name. Okay, why don't we here itself, right? Instead of going GoDaddy?
Instead of going GoDaddy, I cannot buy a name in Azure. The reason being, Azure is not a domain seller. Azure is just a DNS manager. So Azure
Mhm.
doesn't sell domains. You'll have to buy a domain from an external provider.
Mhm. Okay.
But that brings me to a very important point is that, yes, thanks for bringing that up. Is that, yes, you're buying a domain from GoDaddy. This is good enough. You are using something known as name servers here. And if you look at this, right, name servers are the central or the very important pieces to all these things out, because name servers are actually the ones which are holding all your records, right? They are the one which are holding all your records. Now what if these name servers go down? I have two name servers right now. One is ns05 dot something like this. This is a VM. ns06 domain control, this is a VM again. What if these name servers go down? I'll have to work with GoDaddy in order to understand why they went down and etc. But in my case, I'm not paying something heavy for GoDaddy, meaning I'm not paying any support, nothing. I'm not paying anything. I just paid, or I'm just paying for this domain, and I'm paying around 130 rupees per year, not per month, per year. This is what I bought this domain for. So I bought this domain for about 129 per year with a basic support. So I'm not paying anything. So just in case if these name servers were to go down, so imagine that this name server is not available. My website won't be available because these are the servers that are holding all those records. My website won't be available right now. So there is a fear of unavailability of these name record servers, because these are servers, they might go down and etc. I really won't be able to basically go ahead and say, you know what, GoDaddy, these servers went down. GoDaddy, I mean, this website will simply tell me that, you know what, you do not have the right support plan. So, please go for a good support plan so that I can help you out. But I'm already paying for Azure. I'm already paying for the support plan in Azure, and I'm already doing a lot of things. So the point is that, can I not use the servers of Azure to host these names? Because this is, at the end of the day, this is nothing but a server, right? There's nothing but a virtual machine that is running in the backend, which is helping you host all these records and etc. Can I not use the servers of Azure in order to host these? Yes, you can. That is called as a public DNS zone, or a DNS zone concept in Azure. These are called as DNS zones. So let's understand what DNS zone are. So let's come back. I'll go into the resource group and I'll say create, and I'll just type in DNS zone. Or you can also do a search here for DNS zone. So once you type in DNS, there are two things: DNS zone and a private DNS zone. Well, let's understand private DNS in a while, but let me go into a DNS zone. I'll say create, and I am just going ahead and selecting a resource group out here, and it's asking me what is the name of your DNS zone. Now your name cannot be anything. This name has to be the name of your website. So for example, in my case, the name of the website is something like myazureteam.xyz. I'm taking this, pasting it out here, and I'm saying review and create. That's it. I'm not doing anything. I'm just taking the name of my website. I'm putting my name of the website here, and I'm saying review and create this out. That's it. I'm not doing anything apart from this. So let's give it a second and let's understand what happens behind the scene out here. So the DNS zone got created and it says this is my Azure training.xyz. So now let me do one thing. Let me say add a record set. There's something known as record set, and I'll say whenever someone types in www.myazuretraining.xyz, please take them to an IP address which is the actual record, which is the alias record to the IPv4, which is nothing but actual. And in here, I'll just give the address of the virtual machine. And I'll say okay. So I just added the address of the virtual machine here. And if you see, if someone hits www.myazuretraining.xyz, they will be have to be taken to this particular website or to this particular IP address. There's one more thing that I need to do. By default, these addresses will come from these particular name record servers, which is ns05.domaincontroller.com, ns06.domaincontroller.com, which I don't want to happen like this. I have created, so that's the very reason I created something known as a DNS zone in Azure. And Azure by default is giving me 4 servers. All these are virtual machines that are hosted by Azure. So what I need to tell my domain manager is that, you know what, please don't manage this. I'll change it out. I'll say enter my own name record servers out here, and it's giving me 4 options out here, or it's giving me 2 options out here to enter the name servers. So what I'll do is I'll just copy the name servers here. So I have 4. So I'll take all the 4 records. So 1, 2, 3, and then finally the 4. So instead of 2, I have 4 right now, meaning 4 NS servers, meaning name record servers that Azure is hosting. It says changing the name could be risky. Yes, I understand that. I'll say continue. And now once I do a refresh, and now this is what it's telling me. Your request is in progress and it would take about 48 hours to reflect this globally. That's fine, not a problem. So it says, you know what, we cannot display your DNS records. They aren't managed by us, meaning we are not your domain managers. You're using a custom DNS servers which are hosted out of Azure. So now if I go ahead and take this particular website name, let's go here. It's still able to basically give me an address out here. And if I come here and refresh my screen, I'm still able to get something known as this is the server VM1. But right now, the server that I'm using, the name record server that I'm using, is hosted out of Azure. So this is a Azure hosted name. This is a Azure hosted name, meaning this particular server is now hosted out of Azure, and I get all the SLA, meaning I have all the SLA basically. Whenever these servers go down, I can actually go back to Microsoft and ask them why are these server going down. Because you're giving me 4 servers, there should be at least one server which is helping me in order to basically get to my website. Now I am now under the SLA of Microsoft. Okay. Any questions here, guys? Any questions here? Any questions still here? Now, these are called public DNS zones. Meaning this is hosted, or these records must be hosted on the internet. This is how it should be. Meaning when I say it's a DNS zone, all these records that I'm giving should be there out on the internet. But let's say my application is not an internet application. It's an intranet application, meaning within the virtual network. Meaning you are working on an organization. Let's say you need to fill up your attendance. There is something called timesheets that you fill up in the organization, right? These timesheets should not be available outside your organization. It should not be available in the internet. It should be available only in the intranet of your organization. So what, let me do one thing. Let me go back and let me do one thing. Let me go into the networking, and I have the HTTP allow, right? I deny it because this is an intranet application. This is not an internet application. So this will take another minute. So let me deny this out. So the rule is updated. Now if I go here, now it will take some time because right now my browser has cached this out. After like about 5 minutes or something like that, right? You should not see this website being available because right now your HTTP is denied, and also let me go ahead and deny the HTTPS. Now this will usually take about 5 minutes to get reflected. So what I am doing right now is I'm just telling that the virtual machine that is having a code called, let's say this is a VM1. Let's imagine that this is a timesheet. Let's imagine that, for example, this is a timesheet, and this should only be accessible inside the organization, meaning inside the virtual network of your organization. And I have also another machine, which is VM2, which is used by the developers in order to fill up the timesheet. This is what we are doing right now. So what I'll do is, like, I'll just go back to Azure. I'll go into my VM2, and I have an IP address for the VM2. So I'll just take this IP address. I'll say RDP, so it's MSDSC, and I'll log and I'll log into the VM2. And let me see if this website is still working. So now if you see, it's still surfing, it's still browsing, and in a minute it should throw an error telling that the website is not accessible and etc. Because I have denied the HTTP and the 443 traffic, meaning I have denied the traffic to the internet. So it says the site cannot be reached, please check your firewall and etc. Meaning I'm essentially telling the virtual machine that, you know what, you are not supposed to communicate with the world outside because you are not an application which is an internet application, you are an intranet application. So I'm in the VM2, and I'll go into the local server, and I'll just disable the enhanced protection for Internet Explorer. And I'll just go to the Internet Explorer right now. and and let me go into the VM1. I have a private IP for this VM1 called 10.0.0.4, and I have another private IP for the VM2, which should be 10.0.0.5. Both are in the same network. So with that privilege, what I'll do, I'll say it is 10.0.0.4, and let's see if I'm able to load this website. Okay. Says can't read this page and etc. Let's see one thing. Let's do one thing. Let's go here and into the networking. Sorry, into the networking of the VM1, and let me delete these two rules. So I'm not only declaring any rules right now. I'm explicitly telling that okay, fine, these two rules are like kind of. Okay, should delete this out. Let me refresh this out and let me also delete the HTTPS rule. And now let me go into the virtual machine, and this will again take like about 2 or 3 minutes to get reflected. Now I'm able to get a response. And what happened earlier was that I had two rules which were explicitly denying it. So that's the reason I was getting, let's say, that particular error page. But I have now deleted those two rules. And even if I do right now, try to search for this particular website, I'll still get the error. I'm not allowing these two rules at all. I'm not declaring these two rules at all. But from my VM2, if I say default.html, I am getting a response because both the virtual machines are sitting in the same virtual network and they can talk to each other over the private IP. There is no denial of that. So both the virtual machines are inside the same virtual network and they will be able to communicate with each other over the private IP of this one. Again, I am an employee, and every time that I need to fill up a timesheet, I need to come here. I need to type in 10.0.0.4 and then do a / default.html, and then my timesheet application loads. I can go ahead and give my timesheet. I mean, I can go ahead and fill my attendance. If this is just one website, I'm okay with it. But let's say there are hundreds of numbers that I need to remember internally. I have one application for time. I have one application for holidays. I have one application for something else, which is very difficult again, right? So I now decide that what, I don't need this, but I need a friendly name. And this time around, it should be something like time.com, something like this, or timesheet.com. Anything is okay. So what I'll do in this case is that I'll go back. I'll again say DNS, and this time I'll create something known as a private DNS zone. This is private to me. This is only to my virtual networks. This is only internal to me. And let me say create. I'll select the DNS RG again, and this time I'll say timesheet.com. I did not purchase this. I did not do anything. I am just giving any sample name. Anything will work. I'll say review and create. So I'm doing very simple thing. I'm just going ahead and I'm saying, okay, fine, you know what, it is timesheet.com, and I'm just creating this out. That's it. I'm not doing anything. So let's come back after this is created. So right now, this is the scenario that I have. So This website is working with 10.0.0.4/default.html, but I need a friendly name, so I went ahead and created something known as a private DNS zone. A public DNS zone will not work here because a public DNS zone is for the internet application. This is an intranet application. It's not an internet, it's an intranet. It is within the virtual network. So once this is created, let me go ahead and show you all how this works and how we can, kind of you know, use this particular website in order to access our application securely inside the internet. So this should be created in a second. So this is done, and this is how it look like. And it says, okay, fine, these are the addresses and etc. So what I'll do out here is that I'll go here and I'll say virtual network link. I'll say add, and I'll say this is a private link, ECUS, and I'll say this is the virtual network. And there's something called enable auto registration. I'll say enable auto registration. I'll say okay. So I am linking my virtual network with this particular private DNS zone out here. And once this is linked, let's see how it looks like. Let's come do a couple of refreshes out here. Now this will again take a minute or two. So this is what I'm doing right now. I'm seeing I have two virtual machines and all my employees use this particular virtual machine called VM2 in order to access an application called timesheet that is running out of a VM1, and both the virtual machines are within the same virtual network. This is what I have right now. So let me come back here. It says in progress. This should be connected. The link status should change from in progress and it should be completed, and it is completed right now. So let me go back into the overview page, and if you see, I have two records that got added. VM1 A record 10.0.0.4, VM2 again A record 10.0.0.5. Instead of public IP addresses, private IP addresses got added. So using this concept, what I'll do is please carefully remember that this is timesheet.com and this is the VM1 out here. So what I'll do is I'll go here and I'll say VM-1 dot timesheet.com, getting the same response. And if I do a default.html, it says this is server VM1. This is internal private DNS zones, and if I take this URL, go to the internet. Now I'm on the internet, not the intranet. No matter how many times I do this, I'll be still getting an error. The DNS will not be resolved because I'm using a private DNS and not a public DNS zone. Any questions still here, guys? So private DNS is a concept that you can actually go ahead and try it out, because this you don't need to buy a domain for a private DNS. You can just give any random domain name and it'll work. And one more question for you all is that yes, I have both the virtual machines within the same virtual network, so I was able to establish this communication. What if I have these two virtual machines in two different virtual networks? Let's say this is East US. Let's say this is West US. Will it still work? I'm sorry. Exactly, excellent. By using peering, you can do that. You'll have to peer these two virtual networks firstly, and the rest all is the same. So using the peering concept, you can do this. So just try this out, okay? So any questions that I can take for today, guys? Anyone, any questions? Is this clear? Anyone, any questions that I can take? Anyone online, offline, any questions? Okay, if there are no questions, then we're good to close, guys. We meet tomorrow and we'll discuss more, or we'll discuss more on Azure. Okay. Thank you.